Hi guys, this is Cosmic. I wanted to create a re-upload of my guide to farming gear on Barbarian. This is going to be more up to date for the latest seasons since we have the altar. This will pretty much apply to any season. Uh, you go with like the obvious stuff with different seasons that gives you like more movement speed. Um, you don't really need to add damage into the build from season themes. So whatever gives you more mobility, you just add that in from the seasons. For example, Gamer Shred from the Ethereals, that kind of thing. So to get started on this guide, we're going to be focusing on the 6-piece set of the Might of the Earth, and that's going to buff Earthquake. That is the skill that we're focusing on here. None of these other skills are really relevant in this case. So we're going to run the Blade of the Tribes in order to support that. The Earthquakes in this build are cast exclusively by the two shouts, Threatening Shout and Warcry. So we're going to make sure to include those in the build. Warcry, the most logical choice here is going to be to run Veteran's Warning because that protects your Squirt's Necklace. However, you can run the Charge Rune for extra Fury generated if you're just getting started and you're opting to run with a Gold Wrap in your build. The Gold Wrap is going to basically replace all of the toughness choices that we go with here. So Band of Might is not needed if you have Gold Wrap. Mordic Brace is not needed. You would then instead run Warzeshian Arm Guards. You can opt to get rid of Crimsons since you might not have that right off the bat. I would opt for keeping Chelonix Chain because we want to be moving quickly. If you run with Gold Wrap, you just need to make sure to have an Avarice Band on your follower, which we're going to have anyway, and then you would want to have a Boon of the Hoarder. That's going to give you immortality no matter what. You're always going to have Squirts uptime. The one thing that you'll want to have on your bar in order to enable Gold Wrap, or even to play this build, in order to drop the Molten Wildebeest Gizzard Gem for the shield, and run Gogok for more mobility and better cooldown, we want the Grim Harvest rune from Threatening Shout. This is going to give us health globes, which then give us shields because of the altar. So that's one of those updates that was not in the previous video. The rest of the build here is pretty straightforward. So we want to have Ignore Pain Bravado. That's a source of Squirt's protection, and that's also going to give us more mobility. Keep in mind that you might, if you go with the Gold Wrap variant, you might actually just run Sprint in place of Bravado, and then you can opt for another source of mobility that's more reliable, such as Battle Rage Ferocity. It's kind of a smaller buff, but it's something that's going to always be there, whether you have NGM up or not. So when you're first getting started, that could be an option for you. I opt to have the Dreadnought rune, and this is because when running Ingeom, you're going to have lots of charges. However, if you want to hold down Furious Charge in order to move quickly, you'll want the Dreadnought rune in order to remove the delay that comes from not having multiple charges available. Because if the charge has to reset, there is a delay and it charges a little bit slower. So I recommend running the Dreadnought rune. With this slot here, you can in some cases run the Earthquake rune, which you would not want to be casting very often. You would just cast this when you first encounter an elite in order to proc Ingeom. Ingeom is what makes this build work. If you don't have Ingeom active, you need to focus on getting it active. So you might find yourself wanting to start with this variant where you have Earthquake. The rune for Earthquake would cause us to want to take physical skills damage on our gear rather than fire, because the automatic cast, you notice that the base rune of the skill is fire. So if we don't have Earthquake on the bar, then it's automatically cast fire, so we want to have fire skills damage. But if you wanted to run this auto pixel, all enemies are automatically pulled towards you when you cast Earthquake. This also applies to the automatic earthquakes cast from Threatening Shout and Warcry. That means that the enemies will be grouped together, which will help you capitalize on area damage, and it will just help make sure that you're getting your NGM procs. Some people might just prefer this in general because it's a little bit more reliable. Personally, I don't find it to be entirely necessary. I'd rather just have more mobility. But that's also because I have really good gear and I'm already optimized. So you might want to run with the physical variant with the manual rune when you don't have optimal gear. Moving on, Wrath Berserker is a staple of every Barbarian build that does damage, so you'll want to have this equipped. If you are wearing Mordek's Brace, you do not need to select a rune. However, if you are running Warzeshian Arm Guards with the Gold Wrap variant, you'll want to select the Insanity rune for more damage. There are no other runes that have anything useful in T16. The passives here, if you don't have very good cooldown in your build, you may want to drop one of these damage passives here. I would say drop Brawler for Boon of Volcathos. Boon of Volcathos will make sure that your Wrath of Berserker does not drop if you are lacking cooldown rolls. If you are not lacking cooldown rolls, you have nothing to worry about. You can absolutely run these passives. And to review in the cube, make sure you have a Ring of Royal Grandeur here. There are going to be variants that focus on damage for Greater Rifts or Echoing Nightmares that don't need quite as much mobility as we have here, and we'll get into those in this video. So to start off, one thing that I'll say about this build, this works much better if you have cow sticks. How do you get cow sticks? You make a level 1 Crusader, spend a few of your rare upgrade mats, you come over here, you go to pull arms, you craft some pull arms, and then use the rare upgrade recipe on pull arms, and you will create bovine Bardishas. On Crusader, there's not many pull arms in the loot pool, so you'll get tons of them. So if you do one inventory worth of rare upgrades on pull arms, you'll get an average of 10 cow sticks. So why does it rely on cow stick? I will show you. So you go in open cow level. The first priority is going to be find a shrine. We're going to pop the shrine. The earthquake's going to come out. We have Ingeom. Now we're basically a charge barb with tons of mobility, tons of area of effect on the damage here. We're zooming. We have all the mobility in the game right here. And then keep in mind with the cave-in variant that, you know, enemies will be pulled to you, so it can work a little bit better in some cases. But I just really like to be zooming. Pretty much have the most mobility you can possibly get on a barb, but more importantly, you have AoE and damage that is not quite available on the Rend build, the Whirlwind Wrath of the Waste set. So you see we're just destroying everything, and there's our goblin. One thing that I'll mention about this build, speaking of goblins, is that if you come across a goblin floor with a barbarian build, this is the build you want to be using because it does a really good job of clearing goblin floors. The whirlwind set is a little bit easier to set up and a little bit more familiar to most of you guys, but this is going to do the job when it comes to those goblin floors. So I'm just going to demonstrate one more time. We come back in here, we open a shrine, we cast our shout on the ground, now we have Ingeom, now we're zooming, right? So we're going to clear the cow level, and one thing that you want to do is make sure that you have Gloves of Worship on your follower, and that is going to give you the 10-minute effect of the Empowered Shrine that has a 100% chance of spawning in the cow level. Now once you've cleared the cow level and you have your Empowered Shrine, then you'll be able to go out in the open world. So you'll see I have the Empowered shrine buff on my bar right now. And what that means is that now I can go into the open world with this build without having cooldown issues. So otherwise, I need to have Ingeom up in order to play this build. You'll notice when you start playing it that when your Ingeom drops, it doesn't feel too great to play. So historically, there have been builds used by many people on many other classes that rely on Ingeom. This is one of them. So just zooming through, again, it's really good at just kind of zooming through these floors. There's our goblin, and this is going to get you much better results than any other set on Barbarian for farming. So we've got lots of loot dropping all the time in these. This is the best place to get loot for builds that you might want to push. This season, the Raker set is really nice, so I would recommend pushing that. Okay, so just one moment here. We're going to... Okay. So we're going to move on to the other variants. That is the Vision variant, which is what I recommend for farming loot. This variant, actually, that I have equipped now is the same one that I would recommend for Nephilim Rifts. And then for Greater Rifts, we're going to run a similar variant to what we want to run in Echoing Nightmares. So with Echoing Nightmares, let me just do a quick build check here. So this is the build for Greater Rifts, except for we want to run the Boon of Volkethos passive, just in case our Wrath drops off. So let's do a Greater Rift 90. Oh yes, one thing to note in this build is that we're now running Focus and Restraint, and we're now running the damage belt for Earthquake because now we need more damage to play higher tier content. So for Visions and Nephilim Rifts, you do not need this belt, but when you're going past that in a GR90 or GR100, which is what I would recommend for this build, or if you're going into Echoing Nightmares, you want to have a little bit more damage. That being said, we're dropping the Boon of the Hoarder, and we're going with Azay's Stone of Vengeance for more damage. Otherwise, the build is fairly similar, except for we do need to give up Sprint or Manual Earthquake for Seismic Slam in order to proc the Girdle of Giants. So let's go ahead and open a GR90. This is what you guys would be running. Now, to get started out, it's not always too great because we have, some elites like this that fly around. Most of the time, elites aren't like that. So we're just going to go ahead and zoom through. And notice that the elites just kind of melt. All I have to do is every time I encounter an elite, just go ahead and tap Seismic Slam, and they will die. Okay? So again, we're basically a charge barb, charging through, and even dropping some of our mobility items like Rachel's Ring of Larceny, and we don't have sprint on the bar. Still very, very fast for GR90 compared to something like Whirlwind Barb. So you're typically going to be clearing the runs in around a minute, somewhere around 40 seconds to a minute, which is really nice for a barb. As you gear it up, you can go ahead and switch to running GR100s in order to get better blood shard count, which is great for just getting the loot that you want. So you may opt for running GR90s. This is also how you get Petrified Screams for augments in order to run your Echoing Nightmares. So speaking of Echoing Nightmares, let's go ahead and open one up. I'm assuming I have a key somewhere. It looks like I do not have an Echoing Nightmare key. I think what I'll do is I will actually create a separate video at a later time showing an example of an Echoing Nightmare, you'll have the build variant planner inside uh, the description for this video. One thing that I'll mention is that there's a group variant of this build for Echoing Nightmares that's going to bring a lot of the similar buffs you would bring as a support Barbarian, also known as Z-Barb, and it also kills things, and that is, from my perspective, the best build to run if you are on a Barb to run an Echoing Nightmares in a group. So I'll have the group variant as well as the solo variant for Echoing Nightmares in the planner. Otherwise, I hope you guys find this guide helpful. And to top off, I just want to make sure to review the stat priorities on this build. Ideally would be to have cooldown reduction everywhere possible. That would be your weapons, your rings, the normal crit stats just like you would want on any other build. But we're looking for cooldown. We want the diamond for cooldown. The Gogok of Swiftness is here for cooldown. We want cooldown pretty much everywhere on this build. Um, so hopefully that helps you guys out with your farming. Some people will say they refuse to farm for Barbarian gear on a Barb, but if you are playing a Barb and you want to push at least one set or multiple sets on the Barb, this season the Barb has a really good time because they can pull enemies in Greater Rifts, which is really helpful with the season theme with the kill streaks. So you guys want to have fun on Barb and push those builds, I highly recommend using this to farm with. Good luck with the last month of the season, and hope you guys have a great time with this.